Back again, Jim. Here we are. It is yet another fireside chat. And, it seems like we were just together. Oh, that's right. Because we were Monday Night Live. How's Jim doing?
He's alive, buddy. He's alive and ticking. My carcass is a bit rough this week, but I continue to go. I was in the gym at 7 o'clock this morning and doing my thing, and I won't stop.
Well, we appreciate that. And the fact that I can smell it from here. I don't know what that is, but it's just driving me crazy. You just came out of the shower. You're all ready for the ball.
Okay.
As I said, you're going to have to DM me whatever that is that you're using.
Put me in. Put me in.
It's awesome.
Go long.
The beautiful thing about our fireside chats, Jim, is we get to learn about people that we get to ooh and ah at on the small screen, the big screen, whatever screen it is that we're watching. But, Alex is one of those individuals and one of those competitors on the elite trail that everybody sort of takes a liking to, a shining to, just because he's such a positive influence. And having the opportunity to listen to some of the podcasts that he was a part of today, you really get that sense. And the more I listened, the more I couldn't wait to talk to this gentleman. But tell me, how you met and what really tweaked your interest and love for Alex.
Well, I just watched Alex. He's a Shimano guy, and last year he had his boat wrapped with Mastiff in the elites in that, and I picked up on that right away when I saw the Mastiff boat. I didn't know somebody was getting a Mastiff wrap, and I saw that and whatever else, and I watched him, and he had some great events this year. And he's just, he's on that steady climb. And I think that's a lot better than having a sudden blast of glory where you come in and do something good and then just sort of fizzle away, because you sort of got lucky. And, he's not just a fisherman. Like we were just talking before we started here. He's worked with a lot of companies. He's done a lot of stuff in the background, business end of it. So he's like a total package in the fishing industry. So I'm sure he's got a long, long way to go. Like it will be a career.
The thing about this is he had this vision of having a career as a pro bass angler when he was literally knee high to a grasshopper. We'll get him to explain how young he was when he became.
Oh, I'd love to hear that.
When he became driven. It's a remarkable story. What also is a remarkable story that we'll get Alex to explain is his road to the Elite Series has not exactly been paved in gold. He's had a little bit of road rash. A few marks that I'm sure he's not going to get rid of, but it's not been an easy road, and I'm really interested to find out what it was that got him through those struggles. Because when you see him and you hear him, you talk to him, even just backstage before we came live here, extremely positive man. You wouldn't know this gentleman has suffered with anything. So it truly is. So as I said, we will get to know everything about Alex in the hour that we're live. But before we do, if you folks don't know who Alex Wetherell is, let's hear from Alex of today.
So people love to talk about that it has to be a specific rod, reel, line, etc. when it comes to techniques, but here at Shimano, we believe that it's an excellent system that makes it stand apart. And that's exactly what we're here to talk about today, is shallow crankbait fishing, and doing that with 12-pound test Mastiff fluorocarbon line. Let's first talk about the rod. The rod is a 7-foot medium Zodius rod. Zodius rods offer high power X construction, but this also has infused glass. What that does is it gives you the strength that you need in the backbone, but it also offers a really soft tip so that you don't lose any of those fish when you're fishing with treble baits. Now let's talk about the reel. When I'm using a reel that I'm going to be constantly winding on all day, every single day, having a one-piece solid reel is crucial, and the Metanium reel does exactly that. It's a one-piece solid construction. It's made from magnesium, so you're not going to feel any flex no matter how many times, no matter how many days you're cranking that handle down. Also, it offers an MGL spool 3, so even if I'm fishing this light bait like a Macbeth 50, I can cast that thing as far as I want to because the low startup inertia of that MGL spool 3 coupled with the SVS Infinity braking, makes it super easy to cast long distance while also being able to target and pinpoint that bait into tight little spots around hardcover. The Mastiff fluorocarbon line offers a great balance between abrasion resistance and a soft, supple line. That gives me optimal distance when I'm trying to cover water, but it also gives me abrasion resistance when I'm fishing that hard cover. The Mastiff fluorocarbon line that I like to use on this square bill crankbait is 12-pound test. Sometimes if I'm around heavier cover, I'll bump that up to 16, but 12-pound test to me gives you a great balance of abrasion resistance, but also allows you to maximize your casting distance. The last component to this really good system for square bill crankbaits is the lure itself. This Macbeth 50 square bill crankbait matches the design of those old school crankbaits that we all love, but with newer technologies built into the lure. These Macbeth crankbaits offer an internal weight in the body of the bait. That allows them to be casted further and give you optimal distance, but they still retain a high buoyancy in the bait. This allows you to fish this bait around hardcover and laydowns while still being highly effective and not getting hung up. So the Zodius 7-foot medium glass crankbait rod, coupled with a Metanium 150 size bait casting reel, 7-to-1 gear ratio, 12-pound test Mastiff fluorocarbon, and a Macbeth 50 size square bill crankbait completes the ultimate square bill crankbait setup.
Well, now I understand why you like Alex. He loves the square bill. He's a man after your own heart. That's awesome. Well, without further...
you know me, I've always been a crankbait nut. It's what
Exactly.
I did, it's what I do.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, listen, without further ado, it's great to see the Alex of now, but we want to learn of the Alex of old and the Alex of the future. Here we are, introducing the one and only Alex Wetherell. How you doing, Alex?
What's going on, buddy?
Hey, guys. Thank you very much for having me. Hey, I have to say, like, you spoke so highly of me. You put that great video out. It sounds like you did your homework. You really made me feel welcome.
Alex, it just
You
the
are.
beginning, just the tip of the iceberg, and everybody that comes to our fireside chats, we try to do the exact same thing because we want to get to know you. At the end of the day, we get to see you. We see you, doing your thing, but at the end of the day, there's always a story behind the person. And I will say there is a story for you to tell. I've heard little bits of it on other podcasts that you've done, but we're hopefully going to be surprised to hear some new stuff. But first and foremost, I obviously welcome. But what's intriguing to me, and it is going to be to Jim, you were a young lad like us, and the story that you had growing up is not really that different than a lot of us who love to fish, who have that passion for angling. But at the ripe old age of 4 years old, you became hooked on fishing. Tell us how that happened.
So I was just very fortunate to have both sides of my family. My mom's side, they had a house on Sandy Pond in Lake Ontario, and on my dad's side, they had a house right near the water in Cape Cod in Massachusetts. So I had saltwater fishing, freshwater fishing. Growing up, I had no idea like what I was missing at Lake Ontario. Like I didn't even know anything about the St. Lawrence River, which was like an hour and a half away. But yeah, I kind of just in the summertime I was either fishing on the dock and in freshwater in that little creek that they had, or I'd go up to the Cape and fish for bluefish, stripers, and it was just one of those things. Like from the very beginning, I absolutely loved, and since 4 years old, like I wanted to do it for a living.
It's interesting too, because at that young age, it talks in your discusses in your bio that, your parents weren't exactly bass anglers, but they were anglers. And really at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what species we fish. We're all anglers at heart if we love to fish for things with fins. But with that, did you gain some respect, some love, some passion for angling through your parents?
Yeah, definitely. My dad, big time. Like him and his father both were big saltwater fishermen, and even staying right now in Georgia at my uncle's house, his brother, and they were both big fishermen. They would take me fishing to the Cape Cod Canal, and take me out on the boat trolling. And so it was from the very beginning, they were kind of instilling that into me and definitely feeding the passion.
That's awesome. I will ask this question because it's something that I learned from Jim. Were you told something similar as Jim, where, you know, if you catch a really big fish, you get your face in the paper, but if you want to make money, you got to go after bass? Were you told something similar?
I don't know if I was ever told specifically that. I think I just kind of, it was like, I would see in the magazines, like, you know, you get Bassmaster magazine since I was a kid, and like that was what you saw was the big tournaments and the big, you know, giant like 4-foot checks that guys were holding up. So I think it was like, okay, that's what I want to go do, you know. And I think the saltwater side too, it's like I kind of just got the vibe, like unless you like you don't have a big boat where you can go miles offshore and you have a ton of money, I think the freshwater side is kind of more attainable for the average guy.
I couldn't agree more. Now, if you had said yes, that somebody had said to you, I would have called BS. Because at the ripe old age, Jim, are you listening? At the ripe old age of 8 years old, Alex decided he wanted to compete in bass tournaments as a professional bass angler. 8 years old.
Yes, sir.
Holy smokes, man. Talk about a gentleman who is driven at a very, very young age. And really, I mean, a lot of the practice that you got was, if I'm not mistaken, was in a canal, like a back eddy up on Lake Ontario. You'd go on family vacations, and you'd literally, like I love fishing off the dock with a bobber and a worm, and you got really good at catching sunfish. And I don't know if eventually you caught a bass and that tweaked your interest, because my story is very, very similar when it comes to my passion for walleye. I had no idea what a walleye, but back then they were called pickerel. I had no idea what they were called. I had my father, who never got excited about anything, stood up on the boat and said, "Don't lose that. That's a pickerel." Now, I'm probably 8 years old, 7 years old, much like you were, Alex. I'm like, my dad doesn't get excited about anything. So this must mean something. And I'll tell you, from that point on, I became fascinated with walleye. Strictly, was it something similar to you? Did you finally hook a bass and go, "Whoa, I'm into this"?
Yeah, I think it was something similar. Like, so I kind of took like the saltwater approach to freshwater, and like I remember having these big saltwater rigs where, like I think you mentioned, like I would catch sunfish and I would actually cut them up, put them on a hook, and catch. I guess they have a couple different names, but like dogfish or ling or bowfin. I think that's like the most common term is like bowfin. But so I would throw the sunfish out with a bobber, and like my mom loves telling the story of like I would sit in pouring rain for 3 days, and like I think it was like just constant rain every single day. I went through like multiple rain suits, and I don't even know, like I wouldn't stand inside. I was staying outside in the rain, and I would just like stare at these bobbers waiting for one to go down and start taking off. And I was just like hooked on trying to do that. But then to your point, I don't remember like when or where, but somewhere around that exact time in that same little canal, like I remember catching like a bass, and it was just like this idea of like a worm and just like the different colors. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, like you're hearing all these articles and reading these articles in like the magazine about, you know, adding a scent to it. And it's like all these different factors. And my mind just is like racing and going, and it hooked me. And, you know, it's like you catch that first bass, it's a different shape. The mouth is big, and you're like, man, I got to have more of this.
Very similar to you, Jim.
Really, really cool. First fish I ever caught was a bullhead in the Rideau Canal where they skate in the summertime. I caught a bullhead. It was probably about, I don't know, 7 inches, maybe eight inches long. And I remember reeling it up. And my dad he was a special forces guy, so he didn't have any patience at all. And I remember bringing it. I reeled it up. He told me, "You don't have a fish," and I reeled it up, and it's hanging there. I think I probably had it on the line for 3 hours, and it was dead. It was just hanging there limp. And he brought it up. We unhooked it, and he said, "Okay, good, let's go." And we went home and cooked it and ate it. That was the deal. That was my welcome to fishing.
Now, Alex, obviously, you were driven at a very young age. Do you remember the first tournament or organized fish derby that you were involved in?
Yeah, I do actually. So my gym teacher at my high school was the president of a men's club, And at 16, I joined because I think it was at 16 years old, my dad said to me, okay, Alex, like, if you really want to pursue this, you need to start getting involved in tournaments like now. So, okay. So, met my gym teacher freshman year of high school. He helped get me into this club. I joined as a co-angler just so I could learn how tournaments worked. And I remember the lake. I remember who I was paired with. This guy that I'm still friends to this day with, Mickey. He this like Hispanic guy. He has this like aluminum boat, but one of the best anglers in Connecticut. Like a really good angler, really scrappy kind of guy. And I just remember it must have been a dozen times that I got caught in a tree and like, yeah, hey Mickey, can you turn around and go back? And after like 5 times, like your patience wears off and the kindness, and so and he is hardcore. So like he does not like to waste time. So it was like, okay, at this point he's like, oh Alex, you just need to break it off. So I'm like, man, that seems kind of harsh. But then I realized like that's just the reality of it, like in a tournament. So started to break off, and it was definitely not a good memorable event in that sense, but it was really cool just to see the competition side, see like him being able to figure it out and catch those fish and piece that puzzle together. Because like the best way I've ever heard it described is fishing is like a living puzzle, right? Because like you can put the pieces together, but it's constantly moving and adapting, and you have to constantly adjust to that. And seeing someone do that in real time was like that alone hooked me.
That's awesome. Well, it's so cool. Now, obviously, some of those pieces to that puzzle fell apart and disappeared under the table. We'll get to that in a second. But Jim, I don't think I've ever asked you this question. Do you remember the first derby / tournament that you were involved in as a young lad?
Actually, I was a little older when I get into it. I wasn't in it really, really young.
Okay.
And the first tournament I get in was on a lake outside of Ottawa called Clayton Lake. And I had done a lot of fishing, but not fished tournaments. And I had discovered that largemouths lived under floating bulrushes. And this lake was full of them, and nobody else had. I remember going out there with 20-pound Cortland Micron, which we used from muskie fishing. It was bright white. We didn't do the Sharpie trick, which I don't know would make a difference anyway with braided lines the way they are today. I mean, you always, Scottie, you've heard me say this so often that if you ask most anglers what they want, like if they had to pick one color, a lot of them would say black. So let's make our line black so the fish aren't going to see it. I've often had that in my mind. I couldn't figure it out. But I went and fished this tournament for a 6-fish limit. I had like 25 pounds, and it was in a tin boat with a great big giant cooler. And they let me weigh in three fish at like lunchtime, and then I came back, and then somebody said that I brought the same 3 fish back in because they were all big, like that. They said no, we let them go at the shore here. They put them back in, but I won the first tournament I ever fished alone in the boat with myself.
Holy smoke!
That gave me great gusto to go on, And then when like we've probably talked about this before on CFN, Alex. But did you know Tom Brook was a vice president with Shimano?
No, I didn't know.
Canadian vice president. Well, he's like he's the person behind me, and he said to me one year, I went fishing with him. And in fact, we went to Clayton Lake, and I had a heyday. I couldn't do anything wrong, and we caught a bunch of fish. And then he says to me at the end of the day, he says, "Hey, I'm having the water because there's a dam, and they let water out. It's a very small lake, and the trailer, he didn't feel that he was going to get it back up over the way. It's just a really funny spot to launch a boat." He says to me, "Why don't you drive the boat across, and I'll meet you at the campground we went to?" And I said, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I've never driven a boat like this before. I've never driven a bass boat, eh?" So anyways, I figured it out. Because I knew where the channel was because it was a flooded lake. And I took it across, and on the way home, he says to me, "You should fish tournaments. You're a really good fisherman." He said, "I've fished with a lot of good guys in Canada." And he said, "You can fish as well as they can." And I looked at him, I said, "Really?" So they hooked me up with a guy, John McLaughlin, no relative, had a marina outside of Ottawa on Mississippi Lake, which is a supreme tournament destination still to this day. And they put me in a boat, and I remember taking the boat down to the Rideau River and trying to back it up, whole new thing. I got it in the water. I had to learn what a trim was. All this stuff. And my first year, so the first tournament, and I was a pretty well-known fisherman at the time. I'd done a lot of sports shows and stuff. And I get into the boat, and I said to the guy I fished the tournaments with, Glenn, I said, you better drive the boat. I'm not sure. Because I had only driven a high-performance boat like for one day, really out for a day. And everybody was like, how come Glenn was driving the boat? Because Glenn had fished a lot of tournaments. And that was the year they started off, which became Renegade Bass up here and is now, like they've got the Thousand Islands Open and Build Fuel Tour and all that. That's all part of where it came from. And the first year that I fished that, we won two of the 5 tournaments, and I won the Classic. And that was my first year fishing.
Wow.
I won a boat and motor and truck and all this stuff and everything else. And then just went from there. It's going to be a professional fisherman. But this isn't about me. We got to talk about you, buddy.
Well, dude, I will have to say, I'm sure I'm just like Alex. We're sitting back and loving every minute of these stories. It's
talk
awesome.
to me about Mastiff line, Alex. I know you've been fishing with it, and I was so thrilled to see the boat last year with the name on it and everything. Talk to me about it. Explain to the people about it, why it's so good. I remember I got a couple of spools a few years ago from Bob Mahoney, and I was shocked with it right off the bat. Like it does everything it says. I noticed the video Scottie played of you when you were casting with it. The line in the air is totally limp. There's no.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's a nice shot.
Talk about it to us.
Well, so with fluorocarbon, it has its features in comparison to like mono. But even just within fluorocarbon line itself, between different brands, you'll have different characteristics, right? So typically, I think something like a Seaguar is going to be pretty soft, but not that abrasion resistant. And then maybe like a Suffix is going to be very abrasion resistant. So you kind of get like one or the other with a lot of different brands. But the Mastiff seems to be kind of a nice balance between the two. So it's like soft, which is nice because you can use it on a spinning reel, but you still have nice abrasion resistance. So it's not like I'm limited to where I can throw it or what I can use it with. And then I really like the fact that when you get into the lower ranges, you have a variety of options. It's not just like 4, 6, 8, but you have like 5, and you have a little bit of variety when you get down there, especially for like drop shot, hair jig, like some of that kind of stuff. And then, they go all the way up to 20. So it covers pretty much all the bases. I think I used probably 12 the most just because of jerkbait, crankbait, a bunch of different things. And, 18 to 20 for Carolina rig or chatterbait or like some of that kind of stuff. And, where you want less stretch in the line. And that's one nice thing too, is again, if it's soft, typically you have a lot of stretch and it almost behaves kind of like a monofilament. Whereas this is kind of strikes a healthy balance where it's like, you have a little bit of stretch in it, which you want, you want that for, hook sets and whatnot, but it's not too stretchy where, you're losing, the strength of that, or you're losing some of the, natural characteristics of fluorocarbon that you want, whether you're fishing contact stuff or whether you're fishing moving baits. I kind of want something that's right in the middle. Instead of having to choose different brands for different scenarios, one brand, one option kind of does it all. So far I've been really happy with it.
And I will say that Mastiff, it reminds me a lot, the nanotechnology that they have. I equate it to a zip tie. If anybody wants to know, a Mastiff and how it works and the technology about it, go grab a zip tie out of the garage and pull it tight on something. The harder you pull it, the tighter it gets. And Mastiff seems like it's the same kind of technology.
Yeah. I have not broken it since I started using it. Yeah.
Hey, that's what you want to see in a line, right?
Absolutely. 100%.
For sure.
Now getting back to your road to, familiarity, stardom, whatever you want to call it, you had a lot of success as a junior Bassmaster. When did you start as a junior Bassmaster? How old were you when you started that in that circuit?
So that was the following year from when I was 16. So 17 years old, I joined it was at the time the Junior Bassmasters. Like we didn't have high school, we didn't have college yet. And the very first year, like I ended up winning, I think we had 4 events or 5 events on Canadawood Lake in Connecticut, and ended up winning the points overall for that. So I went to Eastern Divisionals. That ended up actually being, because, the different regions within Bass Nation host Each state hosts a different year. Connecticut was hosting, so same exact place. Candlewood Lake had a little home lake advantage. Won by 2 ounces, which was, very, very
Exciting.
crazy. And yeah. And then go to the World Championship in Louisiana on Cross Lake. And then I won that thing by 2 ounces. And that was an event, because like that was the first time ever that I encountered a slot limit. So 14 to 17 inches you could not keep. And that was the thing. It's like I weighed in, I think it was 4 fish. I don't think I got a limit of 5 fish. It was like 4 or 5 fish for like 4 or 5 pounds. But that was the thing, is I caught multiple fish that were like 2.5, almost 3 pounds, and I had to throw them back. And then the other guy in the boat, the younger division, he caught 2 that were like 17.25, and he was able to keep those. So it, because of that slot limit, it was really tight. And like, I remember that event was insane, because it dropped 30 degrees the night before, right? Like, for some reason, cold fronts are scheduled for tournament days. Like, it is guaranteed.
Come to Canada.
Yeah, exactly. So I remember going into a creek, and I remember seeing fish. I've never seen this before since, but I saw the heads of fish in like mats of grass. Like, their heads were in there and the tails were sticking out, and they're just sitting there. Like, they're just completely shut down, don't want to have anything to do with anything. And I was able to just like figure out this bite, just letting it sit on the bottom, and then they'd come over and like pick it up after 20 seconds or something crazy like that. And I remember going in there with like 4 little fish, having to throw other fish back. And I'm like, man, I lost this tournament. And then all the kids like gathered around the boats, and they're like, all right, well, let's check, before we make the drive back, let's check everyone's fish. And I'm like, man, they have no fish. They have no fish. They only have 1 fish. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Like, we got a shot here.
That's awesome.
And then we get like a full police escort all the way back to the stage. Now it was a cool experience.
So you had success early, and I think this is what I'm intrigued to find out a little bit more, because you had some success very early in your career.
Yep.
And then you ventured into the road of the elite, and as I have read, that journey was anything but easy. It was a struggle. And I will have to say, with you having that success at an early age, as you got into the elites, as you were maturing, you were starting to hone your skills and get to become a better angler, you weren't getting the results that you had hoped for. And I have to ask, what was it? Like, you struck a few things with your boat. I think you had a blown motor at one point. There was a bunch of things that you struggled with and unfortunately came across. What guided you through that? What got you through those struggles?
It's a good question. And I think you said a key word, like maturing during that process. And I would have to give number one, first and foremost, like I have to give credit to the Lord and say, like, my faith in the Lord and, being a Christian and having a walk with God is definitely by far the most important thing that got me through that. Because, if you can't lean on, the Lord, and you're trying to grab for anything else, like you're going to fall. If you can't stand for, something, you're going to fall for everything. Right. So, having that faith and having 2 parents that, are Christians, and not just in name, but, in their walk, in their day-to-day, walk as well. And seeing the example from that, because, my parents went through some very serious trials, financial trials. My dad had leukemia at one point, and a lot of different things like that, to where people, it's very easy to talk the talk until it comes time to like walk it out. And seeing them do that definitely had a huge impact on, my life and my struggles and how I handled those things. So I give a ton of credit to the Lord. I give a lot of credit to my parents, especially now, being older, growing up. I really appreciate having 2 parents in the household, having 2 parents that, have a healthy relationship, that, love their son, support their son. Because I think I took a lot of that for granted, because you don't know, what's normal, what's not normal in the world. And now growing up, I really have come to appreciate that. And that's the type of stuff that when you're, going through situations that are heartbreaking and out of your control, it's nice being able to come home and, lean on those people, have that wisdom, and have, even just their own experience to speak life into you and encouragement. And that's the kind of stuff that helped me get through. And as you said, it was a maturing and a process that got me there. And I'll never forget. I like to say this a lot. Like my dad said to me, when I was going through a lot of this, he said, would you rather have the Lord give you exactly what you want right now, and you get like a flash in the pan where it's like, yeah, you have success for a year or two and then you're off the Elite Series? Or would you rather have him mature you, build your character, so that when the time comes to promote you, you're going to be there for a long career? And, I'm hoping and believing that's exactly what happened.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Amen.
Really
Amen.
cool.
I also have to ask, what was the significance? Because you did have a few mentors that you've already mentioned, your gym teacher, but I'd love to know and have you explain the significance of Sylvia Morris as a young blossoming angler.
Yeah, Sylvia is a mate. She's like the grandmother to everybody. She anyone that's in the Bass Nation and anywhere near the Northeast knows who she is, and probably well outside of that. And she's just, her and her husband Jimmy are just really awesome people. I feel like the Bass Nation especially just has so many, stars and individuals like that, within individual states. And for Connecticut, like that's Sylvia. She, even now, even well past their, prime, where they're, trying to enjoy the rest of their life, they're still involved in the CVN and still do a lot of selfless things. So she was one of those people. Here's one cool little story from her. So we used to have to do the casting kids as like a requirement for making the state team, so they would have like the fishing expo, you go there, the kids sign up and you're casting. And I remember being there, and I remember, so in our state, Brian Kirchhoff is a guy that, ended up going all the way through the Bass Nation, won the Bassmaster Classic, and the first year finished last, second year wins the whole thing, right? So good role model in that sense. But I remember saying to her something along the lines of, like, I want to be the next Brian Kirchhoff. And she turns to me and she looks at me and she says, no, Alex, you're going to be the next Alex Wetherell. And I was like, wow, like that is,
That's wonderful.
How amazing is that, right? Like having someone like that with the wisdom in that moment to say that is pretty touching, to say the least.
Hey, Alex, see this guy's name that was just up at the bottom there, Colin Stass?
Yep.
He was the first Canadian Classic champion ever.
Really? That's awesome.
When they made it. Yeah. And it's funny how, because I won it the second year when they had a boat and everything. He won it the first year when it was next to nothing, and he doesn't get the credit he's due, because he was the champ just because there wasn't a big prize. It was that same bunch of guys, but that's so cool to see Colin's name pop up there.
That's awesome.
He's enjoying all the old stuff, the chat about getting there and everything else. He was the first champ.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So cool. Alex, now you're out of college. I don't know how many pennies you have to rub together, but you go to the marina. I don't know how you managed it, and truly I want to hear this story. But you bought your first bass boat. I believe it was a Stratus. Was it a Stratus that you bought?
Yeah, it was a Stratus. Yep.
Stratus. Walk us through that, because I can't imagine, you obviously have student debt, and now you're buying a bass boat to become a professional bass angler. Walk us through that anxiety.
Yeah, that was again very fortunate to have supportive parents. My dad co-signed on that loan with me, because what kid is going to get accepted for a loan of that proportion? And that was kind of the thing too, is it's like, well, yeah, you can get a 19, but it's like, really, you want to have a 20 or 21. You want to, go all out on this thing and go for it. And Stratus was like a nice middle of the road option. It wasn't too expensive. I mean, back then there was no, it was like one front unit, one back unit. So we're not talking some crazy $80,000 loan like we are now. But still, I think it was like 50 grand. And that was a ton of money back then. So I say back then, I'm not that old, but, so
now.
So yeah, I remember like sitting in the office and dealing with so that was actually at Cabela's. So I worked at Cabela's for 7 years, and they sold Stratus boats. So I actually bought it through Cabela's. I got a little bit of favor with them as well, just getting like a little bit of a deal. But yeah, it was kind of like that whole process was wild. Like I remember like, you know, they were going to pick one person to kind of be this like quote unquote pro staffer to some degree at Cabela's. And I remember like the guy in the boating office saying to me, well, you know, we wouldn't if I had the choice, I wouldn't have picked you, but the other guy I wanted to pick wasn't a vet. And I'm like, gosh, like, thanks a lot, guys.
Well, I love you too.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Yeah, I'm looking forward to signing on the dotted line now.
Holy smokes.
So it wasn't all love. I don't think he was the best salesman, but
What's his address? Scottie, we're talking about.
yeah, that guy was a character. But so we went through with it. We signed the deal and ended up buying the Stratus. And you know, it was a good boat. Like the fit and finish wasn't very good. It definitely had a little work in that end. But I remember it used to go like 78, 79 miles an hour with that Evinrude, and it was like, man, it's your first real boat. You know, I loved it. But yeah, we got the deal done. Monthly payments back then weren't too crazy. And, you know, I'd work. That's the tough thing working at Cabela's is like they want you to work all the weekends. And that's when you want to be fishing is the weekends. And you're trying to balance working enough to be able to afford what you need to do while still getting the time off. But I will say Cabela's was very good about working around my schedule, working around getting time off for the opens. And, you know, they were very cool about that.
That's awesome. We are lucky to have and honored to have Big Jim as a big part of our community. So we've had the likes of Cooper, Gussie, the Johnsons on here. And one of the questions I always ask them, being from where we are, and I would have to say you are no different, even though you're from Connecticut and kind of on the other side of the pond. If you, as the bird flies, like you're pretty much on the same parallel as us. Was there a transition for you? Was there a learning curve for you moving from the north, fishing the waters in the south?
Yeah, for sure. You know, and that's like one of my main mentors, Danny. Like he, in the very beginning of me jumping into the opens, like he was very real about it with me. He was like, "Listen, you are going to have some tough times ahead. And like you have to learn all of these different areas and different ways of fishing." And fortunately, for whatever reason, Florida has always like just made sense to me. You know, so those types of places. But like you go to Tennessee or some of these places where it's like clay bottom, nothing on the ground. Like it just, I don't know. It's wild, but I will say, I truly do feel like guys from the north, you know, just are more well-rounded, you know, than most guys around the rest of the country. I feel like maybe Ohio I feel like the Ohio River and some of the tough fishing I've heard out of that place is unique, but up north, like with the cold fronts, especially, I feel like you really have to figure out how to catch the fish in any given situation. We have, you know, titles of bodies of water. We have grass. We have rock. Like we have pretty much everything. So I think in that sense, it's very helpful and kind of at least kind of softened the blow in terms of trying to learn the entire rest of the country.
Jim, we've pretty much had the same answers from Gussie and Coop and the Johnsons. You know, obviously you were one that did the exact same thing, fishing in the north. Did you find there was a bit of a learning curve fishing for bass in the south?
Yeah, I didn't fish tournaments in the States because it hadn't happened yet. Like back when I was doing it, nobody went to the States. And I know the one time I was supposed to go to the States with the Bass Nation from Ontario, and I went and fished the GM Pro Bass Classic in Aurelia, and that was when that's when I won my second classic. I mean, I won a boat, motor, truck, and 10 grand cash, $5 for a big fish. It was like, I think it's still got to be close to the number one dollar and cent prize in Ontario ever, like, you know, forever. It's I don't think there's been anything that was bigger than that because I was way over 100 grand when it was all said and done. But yeah, I know when we go down south and do stuff, we used to do a lot more of it than we do now, obviously. But we had some tough days. Like, I mean, tough days. I mean, Florida, oh my Lord, you had to turn rocks over to get a bite.
Yep.
We had no idea what we were doing compared to up here. I mean, the fish were stupid up here. They hadn't been fished for. They hadn't been fished for intelligently. I mean, it was one of those things. I mean, you got to remember, Alex, when tournaments started up here, there was still guys getting in the boat with like, you know, hula poppers rigged on the rod with a 6-inch leader to
Yep.
fish the bass tournament. Like
Yep.
that was the level of it. You know, they were eager, they were ready to do it. But you know, that's like when I think back to the old days. Al Linder came up here with Ted Capra from Minnesota, and they fished the Rice Lake tournament. They used to have a big tournament on Rice Lake, and they won by like 10 pounds. It was a giant cold front, and they actually won the tournament by fishing buzz baits late in the afternoon on Sunday around the docks in Bewdley. Scottie will know those docks. There's a tackle shop there called BJ's, and it's they're really good friends with us, and they're a huge Shimano dealer. But you know, they fish buzz baits there, bouncing a buzz bait off the post of every dock. There's like 100 strip docks out there from all the campgrounds and marinas and things and everything else, and they clean shop. I mean, who threw a buzz bait? We were like, "Oh, throw a buzz bait in the cold front of you? Crazy? You're not going to catch a fish."
No kidding.
If you throw it where the fish are hiding, you know, like you got to remember, we're just getting into realizing that that you could throw a jig underneath the dock and catch fish.
Right. Was that when flashers were cutting technology?
Oh, cutting, yeah. Yeah.
That was a dig, Jim. That was a dig.
No, that wasn't a dig.
And that's the end of our show. Thanks very much for joining us.
Give me a stick if I ever see you. That's what the pointy end's for.
Genuine question. Genuine. I'm trying to learn.
You know, it's funny.
My backup flasher was a string with a 3-ounce weight on it.
You know, Alex, we can appreciate this. I'm not quite the vintage that Jim is, and I get taken back, and I just absolutely love hearing these stories of how it was back in the day to where it is now. And you know, sometimes I wonder, as difficult as it was for, you know, the forefathers like the Jims, the Babazumis, the Linders that came before us and have basically steered the direction of technology to where it is now. I don't know. Like, do you think there's more of an advantage to folks like yourself coming into the sport with all that technology? Or would you have rather grown up back when Jim was getting to know everything and basically establishing technology when you didn't even really know what you were doing?
That's a good question. I feel like back then, you know, I don't know. That's a really good question because, you know, initially I want to say like back then, I feel like the work that you put in, you could get a lot more value out of it longer. You know, like I remember guys talking about on our home body of water, how long it would take to find and learn things and figure out like a rock wall, exactly where it was. And you know, like you guys remember like triangulation, right? Like you're trying to pin, you know, figure all that stuff out. And then, you know, nowadays it's like there's so much info online that people can learn so much so quickly. Yeah. And, you know, to that regard, I think that's why anglers are just getting so much better, so much faster. I feel like I kind of was on both ends of that. Like when I was growing up, I kind of was like still trying to triangulate stuff. We weren't using like, you know, throwing out a buoy, you know, really anymore. And like you had like a waypoint on my like Humminbird 997, but it didn't advance to where it is now. But now I kind of have walked through that entire process, that technological age. I don't know. That's a tough one. I feel like back then it was kind of nice because it was all instincts. So the guys that had that instinct, it was like very black and white. You saw who had it, who didn't. Now you kind of have in some ways a little bit of a, you know, a wheelchair, like a little bit of an extra advantage, a crutch, because maybe you don't have that instinct, but you're really good with technology. So I feel like in some ways it blurs the lines a little bit.
And it's hard not to bring up technology as a topic without talking about forward-facing sonar. And you know, just briefly, you know, there's a lot of strong opinions out there, and I've always been on the fence. You know, I believe if it's going to help the angler become a better angler, then you know, I don't see a problem with it. But there are a lot of folks that would argue with me on that. Where do you stand when it comes to forward-facing sonar? Do you use it because it's just how you're going to make money, or is it something that you truly, if you were to choose, is it something you could do without?
Yeah, I think I probably am if I fall somewhere in the middle of that. Like I love using it. I love what I can learn from it. the amount that I can learn about bass behavior from it is, astronomical. And it just has really just completely changed the way that we think about what bass do and how they operate and where they are, even like how many fish are out in the middle of nowhere that we had no idea before. But I also love the, fishing a river system, turning all my electronics off and just like figuring it out in that sense. That's like the Sabine last year. Or I guess it was 2 years ago now, but like, I love that. I just love tough fishing, no electronics, just figuring out in that sense. But, at the same time, like there's a reason why we don't use, Blackberries anymore. There's a reason why like technology progresses, it moves forward. So many different examples of that. Like back in the day, if you're talking skiing and snowboarding, like when snowboarding first came out, people hated it. They didn't want anything to do with it. Now it's like one of the most popular sports, so with everything, people don't like change. That's just the reality of it. And then when change happens, then people come around to it. But so I think it's a totally natural reaction, but ultimately, I think that it will have its place. I don't think it's going to be like extremely dominating, because there's still plenty of times where you don't need it to do really well. I just think like, especially last year, given the schedule of the Elite Series, and if you're going to go to Champlain in August and all these fish are going to be suspended on bait, well, it's going to dominate, But if we go to the Mississippi River and we frog fish, well, that's probably not going to be very much of a factor. So I think scheduling and just it'll fall into its place. And, I think it just with everything, we progress and we move forward.
Awesome.
We often joke, Alex, here on CFN. Scottie will get a kick out of this, but I tell you. But we're talking about how when you look at electronics today, forward-facing sonar, you actually see fish turn and go to your bait and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like the ice fishing guys right now, I'm just having a field day watching it every day. You're watching a fish turn and go to a lure. Then you watch a truck go past to the bottom. There's been so many people through the ice this year. It's nuts, eh? But we always have a joke. When I thought I had the cat's ass, because I used to have a Humminbird 8000D on the deck or on the dash, and I had a flasher beside it, and I had a flasher at the front of XLR flasher, which I still have. I think there's one of the brand new ones in the box there sitting right there behind me if I get to go ice fishing this year. But when you looked at a Humminbird deep, the orange line at the top is the top of the water. The orange line at the bottom is the bottom. The two squares at the bottom, Scottie knows what it is. The two squares at the bottom are probably rocks, and one in the middle is a fish. And this is what I had to contend with. And now you watch fish.
Yeah.
Turn around. You can see the shape of them. I know guys that have got so good with this in the St. Lawrence that live like I'm 18 minutes from the St. Lawrence, just by Gananoque. And I know guys that fish out there, and they can tell you that's a 5-pound walleye. You catch it, bring it in the boat. I'll say, it's 5.4. You're off by a quarter pound. You know what I mean? Like there's guys that, and these aren't guys who fish tournaments. They're just guys that fell in love with, forward-facing sonar.
Right.
They're not keeping the fish. They're not raping the water. Everybody thinks everybody's going to rape the water. I'm a firm believer that the people who were already raping the water will continue and will be even worse of a problem. But I think across the board, the vast majority of those fish go back in the water. And we've seen the effects of catch and release. It works, and it's all there is to it. But
yeah. No, good point. I have to say that picture looked like you were using an Etch-a-Sketch to look at the fish finder.
The Etch-a-Sketch came way after.
You had to shake it after you were done for the day just to clear it.
Just like you're wasting your tracks.
Yeah, if you had a bad day, you just shake it off.
It was so funny. I took a screenshot last year of when I fished out back here. I fished here 3 or 4 weekends in a row, and I had all the tracks, and you could see that I was going to a lot of places. And I was talking to Charlie Hartley because he's fished here with me, and I sent him a picture of it, and I said to him, I said, "Look at this." I said, "Same place as this year. It couldn't catch it. The fishing was horrible. It was terrible. I couldn't believe it. No idea why, And he said, "I saw you. There's a lot of places there that you went a few times, but there was a couple of spots there that you could see that it was just black on the thing because I had spent like an hour and a half on these spots, and they're weed beds like the size of a garage, and they're usually loaded, and they weren't there. I couldn't catch them this year. And then he says to me, there was one spot, he says, here's where you lost it. And there was a lone track went across to the far shore of the Big Rock Bluff. I'd never fished this. I've been here for 10 years. I haven't gone near it. And I went and fished it, and it was the most beautiful looking thing. There was big granite cliff 200 feet high. You look in the water down below, there's all the broken rock that's fallen. You know, you just look for a crack and you follow it down, and it's there. You go off the end of it, there's a big clump of milfoil, nothing. It was just dead. But it was the way he identified that one lone line that went over and went down, and it came right back out and went right back to the big black spot. I just thought for sure if I kept going back there, eh? But
now, some of your successes, Alex, one of which I definitely want to highlight, and you know, unless you're Ricky Bobby, who says if you're not first, you're last. Your best finish was second, and it was in 2023.
Yep.
I was surprised to learn what lake it was and how far south you were that came second. Tell us a little bit about how that event, and obviously you would have loved to have won, but coming second truly is an accomplishment in itself.
Yeah, I wish I had. That's one I wish I had back. You know, like that was an event I think I played it wrong, and I should have done things differently. But everything's a learning experience, and you know, got to carry it to the next one. But that one in particular, I was sick for like 4 or 5 days right before the event, and thankfully I finally started getting better like 2 days before. So come day one, I was okay, but I had some. It's kind of a cool story. Like, so I had some fish on a chatterbait, and like I remember throwing like a 7.3 medium heavy NRX rod. I think it was like an 8.73, and I had a bite in practice, and like I reel it all the way up to the boat, and a 6-pounder comes up and just opens its mouth and just comes off, and I'm like, that fish was never even hooked. So I'm like, man, what the heck? And this is where I started the process. I have I think a very weird chatterbait setup, but like I never lose, you know, like certain techniques you never lose a fish on. That's one of those techniques for me. I ended up switching over to, I think it was an 894 NRX, which is just like a 7.5. I think it's a 7.5 heavy. So longer rod, a little bit more, you know, meat to it. And not like the soft crankbait type of rod that some guys like to use. That just, for me, doesn't make sense. But anyways, I jumped up my line, I think to 20, jumped up my rod. I was like, okay, if I hook into a fish like that, I cannot lose it in a tournament. I go to my first spot day one. I catch a 6 right off the bat. I catch like another 4. Had 20 pounds day one. Had a really good day. Kind of just had a very small patch of like grass that had a little like weird edge to it. Just something unique. And that's Florida. Like anything different, because everything looks the same. So when you find something different, it's significant. Day two was interesting. My co-angler in the opens, Bassmaster Open. So day 2, my co-angler makes the cast behind me, catches a fish. You know, it's like 1.5 pounds, and like your heart always like jumps a little bit when your co-angler gets one, because like you're happy for him, but if it's a big one, you're kind of like, I needed that fish. But then he makes a next cast. He catches another one, and I'm like, man, what is? He's like, dude, the fish are over here. Make a cast over here. So I make a cast over there. Line starts taking off. I set the hook 8.5. And I'm like, holy cow, right? So that's all you could ask for, because, you know, that just doesn't happen very often. I catch a 3.5, and then I was like, okay, let's go to my other spot. I had another spot at a different lake. And each day, it was the weirdest thing. A guy would be sitting on my spot in the morning, and I'd like come up and have to kind of fish around the outside of it. And then he would just leave. And that happened day 1, and it happened day 2. And like, it was so weird, because I felt like he was like right on the exact spot, and he must not have been catching anything, or maybe he just wasn't making the right cast. But he would leave. I would go in there, and I would start catching fish. I'm throwing a chatterbait, throwing like a Senko, or just like, I think it was like a big 5 or 6, 7-inch Senko. And I day 1, I caught some like, you know, filler 3-4 pound fish there. Day 2, I ended up catching a 6. So I had an 8, a 6, and then I lost a 9 or 10 pound fish. It struck the chatterbait once. I reeled it in. I cast out, make the same cast, hits it again, misses it. And third cast in there again. I like, that was the weird thing. I would throw the Carolina rig in there, I drag through, I never get a bite. So, okay, pick up the chatterbait again. Third cast in there, I set the hook. It ran right at me, comes up, jumps, and my caller goes, oh, that's like a 9-10 pound fish. And the mouth just does this and it comes off. And I'm like, ugh, like, what are you going to do? So, you just, you like cry for a moment and then you get back to it. But I caught a couple of good fish after that. And it was like 10 a.m. and I had 25 pounds and I stopped fishing. And I made the mistake of stopped fishing because I go, well, like a lot of these other fish are like 4-pounders. So I'm just going to burn fish for the rest of the time. Well, ultimately, I think what happened was that day, those fish were eating and they were eating really well. And I should have capitalized on that. And, you know, I think I could have had 30 plus pounds that day, but I let the fish go. I side imaged around the rest of the day, tried to find more stuff and just like left it alone. And day 3, the guy in 10th place, who I'm friends with now, Keith Tuma, he was fishing the outside of my first spot and I fished in the inside. He stayed there all day. I go to my main area and I had like 12 fish just nip at it and they wouldn't eat it. And I had tried to adjust, couldn't get them to commit to it. And, you know, we had one of the worst rains that I've ever had on that lake where like I was standing on the front deck and I almost couldn't see my front graph. Like it was so bad. And when I get back over for the last 2 hours to the first lake, I go, man, that rain was really bad, huh? He's like, oh, it never rained here all day. I'm like, what? But that's Florida for you. So the short of it was, while I left, he sat on that spot and caught, I think, like 26 or 28 pounds or something like that and beat me by a pound or two. And, you know, really happy for him. But lesson learned, when the fish are biting, do not stop. Like, capitalize on every bite that you can get, because especially in Florida, which, again, being from the north, I didn't really know it from one day to the next, it changes drastically.
That's incredible. Wow, what a story. And when it comes to presentations and what you like to use, and you want to learn a little bit more, I highly invite you to go over to Alex's bio. And I want to commend you on this, because it's not too many pros that I see doing this. You go into great detail, depending on the presentation, whether you're casting a frog, if you're casting a jig, crankbait. You not only mention the type of rod you like to use, but also the reel, the line, whether it's a fluorocarbon leader or braid. But what I've noticed in regards to a lot of what you use, obviously you love your Zodius, but you love your X-Pride too.
Yeah, I love my X-Pride rods. I feel like it's a really nice rod for the price range. And one of the biggest things that I like is I can use the same rod and have like pretty much all of the different options, all the different variations of, you know, like the different models and anything from crankbait to drop shot to, you know, flipping. Like it's one thing when you get a nice rod, but then you only have a few models and then you have to switch rods, and it affects the sensitivity. It affects like pretty much everything, you know, just when being able to feel. So I like consistency, and the X-Pride is a nice rod that has a lot of options. So that's my rod.
That's awesome. You are now sponsored by BKK, and that is more of a finesse style of fishing that I've seen. They make some incredible stuff. But you did a video in regards to large swim baits, which I'm going to play right now, just so we can take a bit of a break and get to know you a little bit better on the water. But this explanation that you give in this video about the big swim baits, are you still seeing that trend toward larger baits? Or are you starting to see that BKK come into play where everybody's sort of downsizing?
I think you're starting to see that. I feel like last year you saw more glide baits on the Elites than you ever did before. So I think people are getting a lot more confidence than they ever have before using big baits. Interesting.
Well, here's Alex on big baits. And of course, the wonderful Zodius. I think it's a Corrado and a Zodius that you're using, but have a look.
Sometimes people get caught up in using the right rod, reel, line, or lure on any given technique, but we at Shimano believe that it's actually an excellent system that makes up a given technique and gives that angler that success that they're looking for. So that's exactly what we're here to talk about today, is what makes an excellent system for swim bait fishing using 20-pound test Mastiff fluorocarbon line. You've seen it, I've seen it. There's a big bait craze sweeping across America. I've never seen so many big swim baits being thrown all over the country. So that's what we're here to talk about, is what makes an excellent system when it comes to swim bait fishing, so that you, the angler, can find success on the water throwing big swim baits, just like this Shimano Arma Joint 7.5-inch swim bait. One of the key features to this bait is flash boost, and what that is a foil mirror on an internal spring that lets this bait emit flash even when this bait is stationary, which is critical when you have big bass following up right behind this bait and taking a close eye on this thing. Arma Boost is another cool feature. It actually allows the bait to be folded in half during the cast so that you, the angler, can cast it further. Without this feature, baits will typically helicopter through the air, limiting the casting distance of those baits. Another really cool feature to this bait is scale boost, and that just gives it a really lifelike scale pattern to the bait. You can S-crank it, you can slow twitch it, and you can burn this thing in, and it's not gonna wash out no matter how fast you burn this bait back to the boat. When casting big baits, you need confidence in your knots. Your knot is one of the biggest things when it comes to big baits and one of the weak points in your line. However, when it comes to Shimano Mastiff fluorocarbon line, one of the greatest strengths of that line is the nano armor technology. And what that is microscopic ridges in the line that cinch down against each other when the line's tightened. So you can make sure that you get the optimal knot strength in your line. Now let's talk about the meat and potatoes of the system, and that's the rod and the reel. The reel is the Corrado 200 DC. This offers you the line capacity and the features needed to be able to cast long distances, but also cast that bait accurately. The heart of the DC is the IDC4 digital braking system. This is a fully adjustable braking system that allows you to dial in the weight of the bait as well as any fishing condition that you may encounter. This is a workhorse reel in the swim bait world, offering you the ultimate controlled casting performance. The 7.9 Zodius is the final piece to the puzzle. The length of the rod allows you to cast that bait further while also concentrating on accuracy so you can get that bait exactly where you want it to go. The rod is made up of a high power X construction coupled with a monocoque carbon handle. That allows you to have a really lightweight setup while also giving you the backbone that you need to cast a bait just like the Arma Joint swim bait. And there you have it, the ultimate system for effectively fishing swim baits with 20-pound test Mastiff fluorocarbon line.
Wonderful stuff, I'll tell you. And I don't know who your cameraman is, but hats off to him because those are some beautiful.
They did a great job.
100%.
Scotty, one of the things that we have new this year is I just got a picture of it here. I don't have one yet. Is a gravitator.
Yep.
And I think this thing is going to be dynamite. And you've seen the Shimano add a bunch of new swim bait rods for these things too. Alex, were you at the meeting the other night?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I was.
I wasn't sure if I saw you or not there because it was everybody there. And when you're talking about BKK, this is the deal, buddy.
Yeah, the OCD box. Yep.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with this. Like there's I don't have to buy another box. I don't have to buy hooks probably for the rest of my down life. It's what it is right there. I've shown you the box when I fish tournaments. I don't know where it is. It's around here somewhere. But sometimes it'd be 15 minutes to find the bag of hooks you wanted. And I had it pretty organized, but there was so many different hooks. And this thing here, when I got that, I just thought, I fell in love.
No kidding.
Yeah, that thing's nice because like I try to get every little divider I can in my terminal box and narrow it down as much as I can to fit as much as I can, and that pretty much does it all for you.
Hey, talk to us about. I noticed you put up that picture of that beautiful new boat the other day. Talk to us about all your sponsors this year. I should say marketing partners. I don't like the word sponsors.
Yeah. So I'm in a Bass Cat for the first year this year. I've jumped around quite a bit between boat brands and haven't really had much of a real deal until this year. So happy to finally be with someone like Basscat. They seem to take everyone in as family and have a great customer service. So from a business standpoint, that's all you can ask for. I'm in a fast boat again. Like I just hit 77 the other day, and I'm loving it. So, and let's see what else. Like obviously Shimano, like I love being with them. And I always say, if I wasn't sponsored by Shimano, if I wasn't on their team, I'd still be using their product. And I try to work with a very select number of companies. And companies that I truly believe in. I'm not doing it for a paycheck, but that way, like when I'm talking to guys like you, like I can just speak freely about it because I believe it. I don't have to BS my way through some sales pitch. So, Shimano falls in that category. Humminbird is another one. Like I've had them forever. I like them. I use them. They have an entire network of, products that you can use with Minn Kota. Like nowadays, I love the fact that I can take my trolling motor, the Ultrax Quest, has a network button on it. I tie it into my Raptors, and now I just hit the button on the trolling motor foot pedal, drops my Raptors, picks them up. Like that kind of stuff is cool. Who else? Solid State Marine is brand new. They're a cool company. So they were in saltwater. They came over to the freshwater side this year. They are the first solid state battery in the marine industry, and they're half as light as lithium batteries, or the same weight but twice the power. And there's no liquid inside, so there's no fire hazard. Where like I've talked to quite a few people where it's like, well, I don't want to switch from AGM to lithium because like they're worried about the fire hazard involved, and there's no, like, they have some videos out. You can puncture the battery. You can, mess it up. Like you can do whatever. It's not going to smoke. It's not going to blow up on you. So from a marine standpoint, that's a nice peace of mind. But it's crazy. Like my 36 volt, 120 amp hour battery weighs 40 pounds, and that replaces 3 60, 70 pound AGM batteries. Like their 100 amp hour, I think it's 90 to be exact. Their 90 amp hour 12 volt battery weighs 12 pounds. So it's like,
What?
yeah, 12 pounds. So I have a 210 in the boat, a 210 amp hour battery, only 31 pounds. So it's the same weight, but it's double the capacity.
Holy crap. I know Steve is watching. Steve, if you can get a link for those batteries, I'm sure there's a few people that would love to know a little bit more about them. So you can, holy crap, a 36 volt battery.
Yep.
It weighs, you said, what was it, 20 pounds?
The 36 volt 120 amp hour weighs, I think, 42 pounds. Wow. So replaces 3, and then like the average guy doesn't need 120. The average guy only needs like
right.
60. So they have a 60, and that weighs even less. So like, even if like you are like, I know a lot of the aluminum boats, like my dealer back at home, Thayer's Marine, they sell a lot of Lunds and some of those boats where you're really limited on your capacity, what you can do. So they're loving it because like you can put a high, capacity battery now into a very small size compartment.
Wow, that's remarkable.
Yeah, that's cool.
So speaking of the upcoming year, I'm always interested to know when it comes to anglers, because I mean, there are, when it comes to fishing, you just love to go fishing. But being a pro bass angler, there are obviously situations, whether you're a baseball player, you're a football or hockey player, there are some arenas you love to play at. There's some fields you love to play on. Are there certain lakes that you really look forward to? And without being negative, are there some lakes that you just dread?
I wouldn't say there's anywhere that I dread. I'm usually a half cup full kind of guy. And, but yeah, I love Florida. Like I love like where I finished second. I love those places, Toho and the Kissimmee chain and whatnot. But so I love Florida just because you're fishing grass, bladed jig, like that kind of stuff. I love tidal bodies of water. I like tidal bodies and I like tough fishing. I like having to figure out the fish. I like the mental aspect of it, having guys get burned out and they're out of it at noon because they just don't feel like they can catch a fish. So the Sabine comes to mind, like top 10 there. And I think for good reason, because tidal body of water and really tough fishing. So falls right into the wheelhouse. I think probably the middle of the country, that Tennessee, clay bottom type of lake is the type of lake that I have not figured out yet. That is if anything, that is the one that it's like the toughest for me to try to understand. There's no grass, or there's very limited amounts of grass. The rock, they don't really like get on the rock the way they do up north here. And it's like, it's just different. And I have not dialed that in. And the herring bite, like Lake Murray, herring fishing points, that is, like, I wouldn't use the word dread, but so far we're 0 for 2 making the cut on Murray. So that's the place I need to put my time in.
There you go. Right on. Jim, any last words you want? We've elapsed the hour, but I'll tell you, this has been nothing but entertaining. I'll tell you, anything less than entertaining, it's been phenomenal. But I'll give you the last word, Jim.
Well, I just want to say thanks for coming on, buddy. We really appreciate it. We wish you nothing but good this year, and thanks for sharing everything with us. And we might see you again.
Yeah, that's awesome. I did lie. I do have a question that Steve asked, and I think this is probably near and dear to your heart. I'm not going to butcher the last name.
Yeah,
the Catherine Elizabeth. Yeah, the Catherine Elizabeth D scholarship program. Speak a little bit about it and what your involvement is.
Yeah, so they had a daughter who unfortunately passed away when she was pretty young. I think she was like in middle school. And so they took that passion and and he was actually in the same men's club as I was when I was growing up in Mid-Con Anglers. And so they took that and started this and, support some of the anglers and the fishing people in Connecticut. And they personally helped me out a ton because the very first year, my rookie year, they put a lot of effort into helping raise money for me, trying to, when I made the elites, it cost quite a bit of money to go do it. And they raised more than a couple of grand to help me out. And they also contributed some of their own personal money towards it. So I put a KD sticker with a little pink heart on my boat. And, I'd like to just show the support and, keep that memory going and, appreciate that family a lot.
You are a gem, man. Solid individual right there. And a great mentor and representative of the Bass Elite Series. This has been an absolute honor to get to know you, Alex. I liked you before I even got to meet you, but I'm even more of a fan now. But I want to wish you nothing but success in the 2025 trail. I certainly think you've got the right individual behind you, and hopefully you speak to him on a regular because we need more of him in our lives than some of the stuff that we see on the telly and in the news. But again, thanks so much, Jim. Thanks for making this happen. Alex, again, thanks so much for taking the time and allowing our community to get to know you, because I'll tell you, you're one of the good ones.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure and appreciate it, and would love to come on again sometime.
Right on. Alex Wetherell, everyone. Thanks again, Jim. You have yourselves a great night. Thanks to everyone who joined and offered a comment. It means the world to have that kind of support, and we will continue to do this as long as Jim's willing.
Take care, guys. I love yous all.
Amen to that.